This tale serves as a poignant reminder of how seemingly innocent actions, especially those born out of humor or spontaneity, can spiral into situations fraught with complexity and unintended consequences. It all began in what many would consider a harmless setting, a company party. These gatherings are typically meant to foster camaraderie, provide a break from the monotony of work, and allow colleagues to bond in a more relaxed environment. On this particular evening, the atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter, food, drinks, and a series of entertaining activities. Among these were games like charades, which brought out the playful side of everyone present. The night was memorable, not just for the fun, but also for the sense of unity it fostered. I even walked away with a certificate, a small token of victory from one of the contests. It was one of those rare moments where the barriers of professionalism were momentarily lowered, and everyone seemed to connect on a more personal level. As the evening wound down, I received a call from my wife, who had also attended the party. I drove her home, and during the ride, she casually recounted the events of the night. She spoke about the food, the drinks, the games, and the general merriment that had filled the air. She mentioned how she had enjoyed seeing her colleagues in a different light, appreciating the opportunity to interact with them beyond the confines of work-related conversations. However, as she spoke, her words began to trail off, punctuated by a yawn that signaled her exhaustion. By the time we pulled into the driveway, she had fallen silent, and I didn't press her for more details. It seemed like just another pleasant evening, nothing out of the ordinary. The days that followed were routine, filled with the usual rhythm of work, home, and shared moments with my wife. However, I began to notice subtle changes in her behavior. She seemed more on edge, particularly in the mornings before heading to work. There was a tension in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. Concerned, I gently probed, asking if something was bothering her. She laughed it off, dismissing my inquiries with a wave of her hand and a quick change of subject. While I didn't push further, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. My instincts told me to be more observant, to pay closer attention to the nuances of her actions and words. Then one evening, she dropped a bombshell. Over dinner, she casually mentioned that I finished work earlier than she did, and that my route home passed close to her office. She asked if I would mind picking her up by car. Of course, I agreed without hesitation, but I couldn't help but wonder what had prompted this request. When I asked her what was going on, she brushed it off with a quick nothing and changed the subject. Her evasiveness only deepened my concern, but I chose not to press the issue, reasoning that if it were something serious, she would have confided in me. At least, that's what I hoped. For the next few days, I dutifully drove her home from work without question. Gradually, her demeanor seemed to return to its usual carefree state, and I began to feel reassured. I decided to let the matter rest, assuming that whatever had been troubling her had passed. However, one evening, when I arrived early to pick her up, I found her already waiting at our usual spot. As soon as she got into the car, she slammed the door shut and urged me to drive off quickly. Her urgency was palpable, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. "Who's scaring you?" She crossed her arms and shot me a look of irritation, dismissing my concerns with a curt response. "Oh, what nonsense. I just want to get home faster. Can we go already?" Her evasiveness only fueled my growing unease. "I'm not leaving you alone at home, you know," I said, trying to coax some clarity out of her. But she remained silent, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. The tension in the car was thick, and I felt a mix of confusion and annoyance. This wasn't like her, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. When we arrived home, she rushed inside, and as I followed her, there was a sudden, impatient knock on the door. Before I could react, a disheveled and visibly upset colleague burst into the apartment. His presence was jarring, and his words even more so. "I can't take it anymore," he shouted, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've waited too long. You promised, and I won't be just entertainment for you." I quickly stepped between him and my wife, placing a hand on his chest to stop him from advancing further. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice firm. He turned to my wife, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Did you think it was just a one-time thing? You slept with me, and now I'm supposed to calm down? This is all I need from you. I love you, and I won't back off." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I felt a surge of emotions: anger, confusion, betrayal. I shoved him out into the hallway, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of the situation. Grabbing my wife by the hand, I dragged her to the kitchen and sat her down at the table. She didn't resist. She simply cried, her words caught in her throat. It took nearly half an hour before she could speak clearly. Through her tears, she revealed the truth. At the corporate party, they had played a game of truth or dare. Someone had dared her to kiss this colleague, and she had gone along with it, thinking it was a harmless joke. What she hadn't realized was that this colleague had been harboring feelings for her for years. He had seen that night as his chance to make a move, and her participation in the dare had only fueled his obsession. Since then, he had been persistent, refusing to let go of the idea that there was something more between them. My wife, afraid of his escalating behavior, had asked me to pick her up from work, hoping to avoid any further encounters with him. As she spoke, I struggled to process the information. What did he mean by hooked up? I asked, trying to piece together the fragments of the story. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought that if I let him get his way, then her words trailed off and she fell silent, unable to continue. The weight of her admission hung heavily in the air, and I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. "I didn't know he was coming here," she stammered. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do, how to get rid of him." Her words did little to ease the turmoil inside me. I needed space to think, to process everything that had just unfolded. Without a word, I moved toward the door and left, seeking refuge with friends for a couple of days. During that time, I grappled with my emotions, trying to make sense of the situation. Why hadn't she told me about this sooner? Why had she allowed it to escalate to this point? Had she changed, or was this a side of her I had never seen before? The questions swirled in my mind, but no answers came. Betrayal, no matter the circumstances, is still betrayal, and it cuts deep. In the end, what had started as a harmless joke at a company party had spiraled into a tangled mess of resentment, confusion, and heartache. It could have been so much simpler if she had been honest from the start, or if I had trusted her less. But life doesn't always follow the path of simplicity. Sometimes, it throws us into situations that test our relationships, our trust, and our ability to forgive. This experience, painful as it was, served as a tough life lesson, one that I would carry with me, a reminder of the fragility of trust and the far-reaching consequences of seemingly innocent actions.